सर्वभूतेषु नामे द्वेष्योऽस्ति न प्रिया ये भजन्ति तु मां भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम् समोऽहं सर्वभूतेषु न मे द्वेष्योऽस्ति मे प्रियः ये भजन्ति तु मां भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम् समोऽहं सर्वभूतेषु न मे द्वेष्योऽस्ति मे प्रियः ये भजन्ति तु मां भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चाप्यहम्
Which verse is this, sir?
This is chapter 9, verse number 29.
Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshyosti na priya ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham
समोहं सर्वभूतेषु न मे द्वेषो अस्ति न प्रियः ये भजन्ते तु मां भक्त्या मयि ते तेषु चापि अहम्
Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshyosti na priya ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapyaham.
The translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. Purport. One may question here that if Krishna is equal to everyone and no one is his special friend, then why does he take who are always engaged in his transcendental service? But this is it is natural. Any man in this material world may be very charitably disposed, yet he has a special interest in his own children. The Lord claims that every living entity, in whatever form, is his son, and so he provides everyone with a generous supply of the necessities of life. He is just like a cloud which pours supply of rain all over, regardless of whether it falls on rock or land or water. But for his devotees, he gives specific attention. Such devotees are mentioned here. They are always in Krishna consciousness, and therefore they are always transcendentally situated in Krishna. The very phrase Krishna consciousness suggests that those who are in such consciousness are living transcendentalists situated in Him. The Lord here says directly, Maite, they are in me. Naturally, as a result, the Lord is also in them. This is reciprocal. This also explains the words, whoever surrenders unto me, proportionately I take care of him. This transcendental reciprocation exists because both the Lord and the devotee are conscious. When a diamond is set in a golden ring, it looks very nice. The gold is glorified, and at the same time the diamond is glorified. The Lord and the living entity eternally glitter, and when a living entity becomes inclined to the Lord is a diamond, and also this combination. Living entities in pure state are called devotees. The Supreme Lord becomes the devotee of his devotees. If a reciprocal relationship is not present between the devotee and the Lord, then there is no personalist philosophy. In the impersonal philosophy, there is no reciprocation between the supreme and the living entity. But in the personalist philosophy, there is. The example is often given that the Lord is like a desire tree, and whatever one wants from this desire tree, the Lord supplies. But here the explanation is more complete. The Lord here is stated to be partial to his devotees. This is the manifestation of the Lord's special mercy to his devotees. The Lord's reciprocation should not be considered to be under the law of karma. It belongs to the transcendental situation in which the Lord and his devotees function. Devotion of this material world. It is part of the spiritual world where eternity, bliss and knowledge predominate. Om Jnana Tasya Jnanam Janitulake Chakshurmridam Tasmashi Namaha Namo Vishwadaya Krishna Daleshwade Muktinatha Swami Vinaya. To all. But whoever renders service to me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a special friend to him. So we see in the material world there's a lot of partiality. Especially if you've lived in Australia, you will know that even though it claims to be very transparent, there's a lot of partiality here as well. People generally tend to stick to their own flock. You know, like if you are part of a certain group, people generally prefer to give responsibilities to you, or they will only speak to those particular people. They will not speak to people who are outside their group. Like, for example, if you're living in India, the Indians, they like to associate with Indians only. They don't like to associate with those who are from Pakistan. Like, this is just a general observation that we notice in people. And we consider this to be partial, because sometimes this partiality may take different forms. Like, it may be racist, it may be casteist, it may be all kinds of things. So we see all of that. But here Krishna is also saying something which is, at least superficially, it appears quite similar. So Krishna is saying that, he's equal to all. So he doesn't envy anyone and he's equal to everybody. In the sense that if someone does any good thing, Krishna will give him the benefits of his good deeds. And if someone commits any sinful activities, Krishna will punish them with whatever punishment they deserve. But Krishna is saying here that one who is a devotee of the Lord, Krishna personally takes care of such a devotee, because Krishna is saying that he who is a friend to me, I am also a friend to him. So one may argue that Krishna is doing exactly the same thing. So much so that if you look at the next few verses, Krishna is actually saying Abhichetsu Duracharo Bhajate Mam Ananyapa. So Krishna is saying that even if this person who is a devotee of the Lord, even if such a devotee commits an abominable action, or if he commits some sinful activity due to his past conditioning, Krishna is saying that such a person is also sadhu eva samantavya, which means that he is still to be considered a sadhu. So this may be said that this is extremely partial and it's not fair, because Krishna is meant to be a judge and Krishna is meant to be a king. How can a judge show partiality? Like if we saw recently in the news, I don't know how many of you follow American politics, but in American politics there is everyone knows who the president of the United States at the moment is. Who is it?
Donald.
Biden? Yeah, very good. Yeah, so recently in the news there was an incident where Joe Biden's son was engaged in some kind of corruption. And we know that he forgave his son because he knew that when Trump comes in, maybe his son might get implicated in that crime and he won't get any pardon. So he kind of forgave his son so that that case eventually goes away. So we see that this level of partiality, especially with people who are high up in power, is quite predominant. In India also there's this whole thing about nepotism. Like if you are a high-grade politician, then your son gets entry into politics without any effort. Whereas those who are struggling, they have to like struggle. They have to do a lot of effort, and then they're able to get it. But here we see superficially it appears that Krishna is also very partial to his devotees. So much so that Krishna is saying that he protects them at all costs. So even if a devotee is, obviously a devotee is meant to be a good person. So much so that a devotee is meant to be a paradukha dukhi and a parasukha sukhi. Which means that if someone is happy, the devotee becomes happy. And if someone is distressed, the devotee is also distressed. So the devotee is meant to have a character which is basically with which he is meant to work for the welfare of everybody. But if because of past habits, if a devotee commits some kind of sinful activity, then Krishna is willing to forgive such a devotee. And he also says that such a devotee is still to be considered a sadhu. Now this you might say it's a bit ridiculous, like how is this possible? But actually there is a science to this. And that is why it is said that Siddhanta Boliya Chitte Nanga Valas, which means that devotional science or the way in which devotion works, so Krishna's dealings work with his devotees and with everyone in this material world are quite different. They're not to be considered mundane. They're not the same as this current world. So how do we understand that when there is a person who's committing sinful activities and Krishna punishes them, that he is actually equal to them and also to those who are doing pious activities and they're getting the good results of their activities? So actually we should look at it like this. Like, first of all, whenever we commit sinful activities, Krishna actually forgives majority of our sins. So whenever we commit sinful activities, like if you think about how many times we lie during our workplace, we probably lie very often. How often we have to cheat other people, especially those who are doing business. You have to do all of these things. So you have to do all of that. And when we are eating, like we again commit lots of sinful activities. Like you may kill plants, you may kill animals. Like of course you have to do something to eat, but ultimately we occur sinful reactions for any kind of violence we do. So basically for all of these things we are meant to suffer some kind of sinful reactions. But Krishna actually, first of all, he forgives all of our sins. Then secondly, he actually punishes us in such a way that our sinful tendency is reduced. So like for example, like nowadays when there are people who do drugs, what do? They don't send those, like if you go to Singapore and some other countries, what they do is they put these kinds of people into jail. And then what happens? As soon as they come out of jail, they start doing the same thing again. So what the governments have realized is that if we are meant to punish them, we are meant to punish them in such a way that they stop doing their drugs. So what they do is when they send these people to jail, they also send them to a rehabilitation program. So these people slowly they get rid of their habits of taking drugs and then eventually they become normal citizens. So similarly, whenever Krishna punishes us for our sinful activities, he makes sure that we have the association of sadhus, we have the association of his word also in the form of Bhagavad Gita. Like for example, if you go out on book distribution and when you go out on Harinam, etc., we find so many people who are completely distressed. Like in fact, there's one boy who comes here who was actually about to commit suicide at that time. So he was suffering the sinful reactions of his for a very long time. And maybe at that time he wanted to commit suicide, and Krishna was so kind that he sent one of his, he sent the Harinam party over there as well. So then this boy, he became, interested in Krishna conscious philosophy, and now he's a devotee. He gave up his habit of drugs, he gave up his habit of alcohol, he even gave up coffee, which, is very, very difficult for most people to give up. He gave up all of that. Why? Because he could see Krishna's mercy coming through. So whenever Krishna punishes a person, he also punishes them in such a way that they eventually lose all of their bad habits. So Krishna's punishment is not like the punishment of normal jails, where if you do something sinful, you get thrown into hell. And similarly in Christianity also, they have this concept that, I don't know how many of you are very familiar with Christianity, but the modern day Christians, they believe that if you have committed some kind of sinful activity, then you're meant to remain in hell forever. Like you can't get out of hell. Like once you die, you will be in hell forever, for eternity. You will be like that. Now it sounds a bit depressing and it sounds a bit concerning, but actually the devotional understanding or the full philosophical understanding is not like that. We understand that yes, people may go to hell, but they only stay in hell for a short period of time. Like we know that when the soul leaves the body, it goes to Yamraj. And actually it is said in Shastra that Yamraj does not punish a person until the person has agreed and they actually are convinced that they have committed a sin. So let's say you have committed a sin. Let's say someone has committed adultery and they don't believe that they have committed adultery. So then what Yamraj will do is Yamraj will show them like a whole video and he will show them, like see this is what you have done and this is the impact of your actions. Like the other person went and committed suicide, blah blah blah, whatever. Like he will show you the whole film. And then when the whole film is shown to you, you will feel a sense of guilt in your heart and you will feel like, okay, yes, whatever I have committed was wrong. I should not have done that. And that's when the punishment is given. So actually punishment is not given immediately. Because otherwise there's no point to punishment. So that is why the way we understand punishment and even hellish planets in the Vedic tradition is quite different to those of the Abrahamic traditions like Christianity, etc. So whenever Krishna punishes a person, he punishes in such a way that the person will reform. Similarly, we notice that when Krishna gives the results of pious activities, like let's say you have performed some punya of giving some charity to some needy person and opening some old age homes, etc., then you get some punya also. So then Krishna, what he does is he does not, now you might find this a bit interesting, but Krishna does not fully give you the results of the punya also. So he gives you the results of the punya to a certain extent and then he takes it away after some time. So why would Krishna do that? The reason Krishna does this is to make us realize that this material world is ultimately temporary. This material world does not have a real place. So if, let's say, Krishna gives us, let's say you've done some pious activity and Krishna gives you like a lot of benefit, like he gives you a very, very long life on this material world. You might think that, okay, well, maybe I should keep doing this. So you will keep doing more and more and more and more punya, and you will try to keep increasing and increasing and increasing your life, even at the cost of poor health, and even at the cost of, eventually that person will become sinful. Why? Because he becomes so attached to his opulence that Krishna has given him that he wants to maintain it. So when he notices that this opulence is slowly going away, then the person will slowly become more and more sinful. There are so many, I'm sure many of you know lots of philanthropists also. Like for example, Bill Gates was one, etc. All of these guys, they love giving, or at least at that time, I don't know the technicalities of business, but at least at that time, they love to give a lot of charity. We know that as a fact. Then what do we notice that as soon as their bank balance starts to take a little bit of a hit, they start doing more and more tax saving and all of that, and then their charity and all of that level, it eventually starts to reduce. So basically, what Krishna is trying to point out, or what the reality of this material world is that the results of our pious activities are not permanent. So what this means is, let's say you have done some charity, or you have done some good deed. Basically, the results of that you will only get for a certain period of time, and then they will go away. So then the person has to exert more energy and more effort in terms of preserving those effects of the pious activities. So when Krishna notices that a person is constantly doing this, then Krishna becomes a bit concerned, because when a person is doing this, he forgets that eventually he will have to die. A person forgets, whenever he gets disease, he forgets that okay, I'm not meant to remain in this material world. I have a material body, and this material body is actually not meant to belong to me. I am actually an eternal soul. I am a jiva-atma, I am a soul, and I am not this body. So a person keeps suffering, but at the same time he is in the illusion that he is very happy. So that is why Krishna also does not completely give you the results of the pious activities also. The results of the pious activities are not eternal. So on one hand, Krishna forgives a lot of our sins and he is trying to reform us. On the other hand, he is also making sure that we don't fully get the results of all of our pious activities also. Because if he keeps giving us results of pious activities, then we will forget that we are meant to die one day also. So that is why Krishna does not do that. So here, but then Krishna, what does he say? Krishna says that one who renders service unto me is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. So for a person who is rendering devotional service, however, so above punya and papa, above pious activities and sinful activities, there is devotional service. So one is performing bhakti to the Lord. So when one performs bhakti to the Lord, then things are a bit different. Why? Because one has entered into the family of Krishna. So if one is performing bhakti, then you're not just an office member. You're not just a staff member in Krishna's family or in Krishna's business. When you start doing bhakti, you actually become a member of Krishna's family. You become like a son, as Srila Prabhupada mentioned in this purport. He said that you actually become like a son. So, because you surrender your life to Krishna, because you dedicate your time, your energy, your activities towards Krishna, then Krishna feels obliged to give his time, his energy and his possessions to you. Obviously, Krishna can't, we can't give as much as Krishna can give because we don't possess anything. Like Krishna has more than 1 million Lakshmis are there with Krishna and Vaikuntha. So we possibly, how much money do we have? Like we may have like few 100,000, maybe million. If you're lucky, you may have some millions. But all of this is just a speck for Krishna. Like Krishna does not really care about how much money we have. When Krishna wants to give, we can't even see the extent of how much he wants to give. So actually Krishna is not very much interested in what we want to give, but how much we want to give Krishna. So when a devotee wants to give something to Krishna, then Krishna becomes extremely obliged and Krishna feels like he needs to reciprocate also. Why? Because Krishna has already said that Krishna is equal to everyone. So if Krishna is equal to everyone and he reciprocates with us, then person who is dedicating their lives to Krishna, Krishna also needs to dedicate something to them. But the problem is Krishna can't give his life. How can Krishna give his life? Logically it's not possible. Like a person can die for Krishna. But how can Krishna die for someone? Krishna is the eternal Lord. So that is why Krishna says to the gopis, he says that, I cannot repay your debt. Whatever you have done for me, all this devotional service you have done for me, I am helpless. He says that is why you need to be satisfied with your own service. He says that even if I want to give you all of the riches within this whole universe, he said, none of that will compare to whatever service you have done. Because you have given me everything. And he says that if I try to give you everything, even that won't be enough. Because I need to give you myself. So that is why Krishna feels extremely obliged towards the devotees of the world. Because the devotees give everything. So actually it's a good deal for us. Like, it's almost like if there is a king and there is a pauper, all the beggar needs to do is the beggar needs to take his, let's say there's a beggar, what does a beggar have? I'm not talking about nowadays. Nowadays beggars may have like 5-digit bank account, they may have some salary, they may have some flats also, they may have some cars. I'm not kidding. Like if you go to India, you will notice that some of the beggars, they have a lot actually. Funnily enough, there's just a side story. One of my brahmachari godbrothers, he was traveling in a train once, and there was a beggar who was sitting next to him. He was dressed like a sadhu as well. So the beggar, he asked him, he said, "Oh my God, had such a terrible day today." So then my godbrother, he laughed and he said, what happened? He said, "Oh, I only made 1,000 rupees." So then godbrother asked him, 1,000 rupees? He's like, that sounds like a lot. He says, how long did it take you to make 1,000 rupees? He said, in 1 hour I just made 1,000 rupees. And that is a bad day for him. So imagine if he works like 8 hours in a day, he's getting 8,000 rupees. He doesn't have to pay any income tax. Like you have to pay income tax in India, but he doesn't have to pay income tax. And then if he works for the whole month, you can imagine how much he's earning. So he's earning a 5 or 6 digit salary. And meanwhile, everyone else is struggling to get a job. That is why it is said that that's what I'm talking about beggars back in the day, not current time beggars. So beggars back in the day, what would they have? They would just have like maybe a little kurta, torn, maybe nothing else, and they might have a gamcha, they might have a little dhoti. And then imagine if the beggar goes and he says to the king that, I want to offer you everything I possess, and he takes off his kurta and offers that. Then if the king is fair, then the king also has to offer everything to that beggar. He can't just give him the price of that kurta, because if you look at it proportionally, the beggar has given him something that he possesses. He's given him half of his possessions. So then, technically speaking, the king also needs to give him half of his possessions. But, that may not be possible. So if you look at it in terms of fairness, that's how it would be fair. And that's what Krishna says. So if you are able to give your life to Krishna, if you give some time to Krishna, then Krishna has to give more and more to you, because ultimately Krishna has been around for much longer than we have been. Krishna possesses so much more than we possess. So that is why actually it's in our benefit to dedicate all of our time, all of our energy, and all of our money, everything in Krishna's service. Because the more we engage everything in Krishna's service, then Krishna will look after us. Because Krishna belongs to us as well. So from a practical point of view, this makes sense. And if you look at it in terms of proportion and fairness, also this makes sense. So that is why Krishna says here that one who is a friend to me, I am also a friend to him. And so much so that, again, as I was saying, that if you look at the subsequent few verses, Krishna is saying that even if my devotee, if he by habit commits some kind of sinful activity, then even that is forgiven. But if a normal person commits some kind of sinful activity, that may or may not be forgiven. So here Krishna has a special place in his heart for the devotees. And you might say again, this is partial and this is not fair. But actually it makes sense, because these sinful activities that a devotee might commit may be due to past conditioning. Now of course, if someone is habituated to performing sinful activities, and if one comes into devotional service with this mindset that, like, I'm going to perform sinful activities, then such a person is not a sadhu anyways. A sadhu is one who recognizes that they have lots of faults and they want to correct themselves. So a sadhu is a person who goes to the hospital to get treatment, whereas a person who is not a devotee may come to the hospital to steal some kidneys, or he may go to the hospital to steal some medications. So he may appear like a patient, but he's actually just there to steal some possessions. Like for example, I'll give you one example. Like there is, when I went to Mount Isa. Mount Isa is a place. How many of you know where Mount Isa is? Mount Isa. Okay, not many people know where Mount Isa is. So Mount Isa is in Queensland. If you go north and if you go towards the western direction, so towards Northern Territory, there is one very small mining town which is called Mount Isa. Over there you have lots of Aboriginals, and they're very poor. They don't have any house. They live on the street essentially. So what do? When winter comes, because it's in the desert area, it gets extremely cold, and temperature drops to like 2, 1, or sometimes even 0 degrees there. So these people, they don't have any shelter, they don't have any home, they don't have anything. So what do? At the night, at around 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, what do? They call the ambulance, and they say, I have chest pain. Yeah. So then when they call and they say, I have chest pain, according to Australian law, the ambulance has to go. So then the ambulance goes all the way to these people, brings them in. They know exactly all the right things to say. So they will say, I've had central crushing chest pain. This pain is going up to my jaw and it's going down into my arm. They will say exactly the right things. So then because of that, the doctors are obliged to keep them in the hospital, and you're obliged to do tests for at least 6 hours, 8 hours, etc. to make sure it's not a heart attack. And when the results come back all normal, they say, okay, well that's fine, I'll go home. And by that time it's morning and it's already sunny. So they get a very nice sleep overnight in the hospital. And then they go back home. And in the next few days, they'll do exactly the same thing. They'll come back again and they'll do exactly the same thing. So there are some people like that also, who do devotional service to ask something from Krishna. They don't want to come to Krishna to serve him. They don't want to come to Krishna because they think that they actually have a problem. They're there just to exploit people, and they're there just to take something from Krishna. They will come to Krishna when they need something, and when they don't need something, they will go away from Krishna. So those are not the kind of devotees that Krishna is talking about here. Those are not the sadhus, who if they even make a mistake once, then Krishna is willing to forgive them. The sadhus that Krishna is talking about here are those who are regularly trying to improve themselves, and who are genuinely convinced that, I am not a very pure person, I am not a purified person, and I need some treatment in the form of Krishna Katha, and I need some treatment from the gurus and from the Shastra, from Bhagavad Gita. I need to read those instructions and I need to implement them in my life. So if such a person, by mistake, if he commits some sinful activity, then Krishna is willing to forgive such a person. And he says, Sadhu Deva Samantavya, which means that, like such a person is still to be considered a sadhu. A person should not be considered as a sinful activity, as a sinful person because of that. So basically, to summarize whatever we've discussed today, Krishna is generally speaking, he is quite fair to everyone. So Krishna, if you do some sinful activity, he will punish you, but he will punish you in such a way that you reform yourself. And when you perform pious activities, then Krishna gives you the results of your pious activities. But he will also withhold them so that you don't become too attached to the results of your pious activities. Because if you become too attached to the pious activities, then you will forget that you have to die and that we have to suffer disease, and then you will have to take birth again, you will have to be born again. So that is why Krishna also withholds some of the pious activities. But for his devotees, he takes special care. For his devotees, he makes sure that this birth or how many of births they're taking are eventually leading up towards him. So eventually a devotee will, once they leave their body, they will eventually go back home, back to Godhead. And that is what Krishna is planning for his devotees. But he does not do that for everyone. He only does it for those who surrender everything to him. So Krishna in that sense is fair, but also superficially he may look unfair because he's not providing his dham to everyone. He's only providing his dham to those who surrender unto him. So having said that, I will finish there. If anyone has any thoughts, any questions, any comments, any criticisms, we can take that now. Or any questions as well.
Please, I want to know about the sadhu, definition of sadhu.
Okay, yeah. You want to know about the definition of a sadhu. Now there are many definitions of sadhu in Shastra. One of the definitions of sadhu is one who cuts. So cutting is known as sadhu. So what is a sadhu cut? So sadhu is one who cuts. Firstly, he cuts in his character. He tries to cut away all of the negative qualities that are there within his heart. So such a person is known as a sadhu. If we take it on a slightly higher level, a sadhu is one who is willing to cut all of his attachments from this material world, and he wants to attach himself to Krishna and the devotees. And such a person is known as a sadhu. So that is the definition of a sadhu. Yes, so not everyone who dresses like a sadhu is a sadhu. Because some people dress like a sadhu, but they're not interested in cutting their negative qualities. They're interested in cutting half your income to take it for themselves. Or they're interested in cutting your attachments to the material world so that they can enjoy their attachments. So that is why sadhu should not be sadhu should not be judged by their dress and their externals. Like if someone has put nice tilak or someone is wearing nice dhoti, that does not mean they're a sadhu. Sadhu should be judged by their words, and sadhu should be judged by their character. Are they trying to reform themselves? Are they trying their hardest to make sure that this birth that this birth is the last birth in this material world? Are they trying to make sure that they engage fully in the service of Krishna? So if a person is trying to do that, then such a person is known as a sadhu. Thank you. Very nice question. Yes, one question.
How to attain moksha?
Oh yeah, very good. Yeah, so that's a very good question. So it is explained that there are 4 purusharthas. So there is dharma, artha, kama and moksha. So most people they go for dharma, artha and kama. But if one wants to obtain moksha, one needs to approach Lord Mukunda. So Mukunda is who? Mukunda is one who gives moksha. So moksha data is the Mukunda, which means that is another name for Krishna. So there are many different ways to obtain moksha. So there is one process known as karma yoga. Karma yoga means you perform your activities and you give the results of your activities to Krishna. So if one performs karma yoga, one can obtain moksha. Above that is another higher level, which is jnana yoga. Jnana yoga is where one tries to understand about Krishna. So not just activities. Krishna has given us intelligence also. So then when one uses their intelligence to try to understand about Krishna, that is known as jnana yoga. Above that is actually bhakti yoga. Now you might be surprised that how is bhakti yoga above karma yoga and jnana yoga, but actually the evidence is there in Bhagavad Gita. So bhakti yoga is what? Bhakti yoga is when one, first of all, it includes both karma and jnana yoga in the sense that one offers the results of their activities to Krishna, one is trying to understand about Krishna, and one serves Krishna. So when one does all 3 of them, so serving Krishna means what? Serving Krishna means doing 2 things. Shravanam and Kirtanam. When one likes to hear about Krishna, Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's message through philosophy in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, And when one likes to chant his holy name, like Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So when one likes to do all of these things, then one is considered a Bhakti Yogi. And you might say, well, why is Bhakti Yogi considered higher than Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga? But actually Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in 6th chapter, Yogi nam api sarvesham, mad gatirantaraatmana, shraddhavan bhajate yoma, same yukta tamo mata. So Krishna says that yogi nam api sarvesham, among all of the different types of yogis, mad gatirantaraatmana, shraddhavan bhajate yoma. So one who with shraddha, with faith, worships me, Same Yukta Tamomata, which means Krishna is saying that in my opinion, that person, that yogi is the highest form of yoga. So when one performs Bhakti Yoga, it's said that Mukti is there in your grip. Like if you're doing Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, you need to exert some kind of endeavor, you need to be very conscious. But with Bhakti Yoga, if you're performing Bhakti Yoga, Mukti is already there. And the devotee does not even care about that Mukti because it's just like a side effect. Like, you don't have to even worry about it too much. You're experiencing so much transcendental bliss which is even above mukti. So even in mukti, as I was saying, there are different types of mukti, but we don't have enough time to discuss it. But one of the muktis is where it's called the Sayujya mukti, where you become free from all of your bodily distresses and you obtain moksha. Yeah. Above that, there are different types of mukti also. There is one called Salokya, where you go to the planet of the Lord, you go to Vaikuntha. Then one is Sarupya, which is where you obtain the same form of the Lord. And then there are many other kinds of muktis also. There are 5 different types of muktis, like that I described. So the best way to obtain mukti is to perform Bhakti Yoga. And by chanting Hare Krishna, one can obtain mukti also. Yes?
And even I heard about like we do with Hare Krishna, but the pronunciation of Krishna is also not right. And if you don't do it the right way, you don't get the right sort of, blessing from God.
Yeah, that is a common, actually I would say that is a misconception. You are right in the sense that if you don't perform in the mantras, it is said that if you don't perform the mantra right, you don't get the effect. That is 100% correct. But there is a small caveat to that. The caveat is that this rule only applies to the mantras from the Vedas. So if you're reading the Rig, Sam, Yajur, Atharva Veda, and if you're reciting mantras from there, then this rule applies, that if you recite the mantra slightly incorrectly, you don't get the result. But this Hare Krishna mantra is actually not there in the Vedas, it's there in the Upanishads. And because it's there in the Upanishads, even if you mispronounce it, you still get the result. So there's a small caveat to that. Yeah. So we see so many Westerners, like when you go out, like if you see Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada had so many Western disciples. And all of them were able to give up all of their negative habits, even though superficially it appeared that they're not pronouncing the mantra correctly. Why is that? That is because the mantra still has potency, even if performed incorrectly, even if chanted like incorrectly. That is the potency or that is the power of the mantra. Okay. Yes?
In the Hare Krishna Maha, Rama is to be considered as Lord Rama, Sita, the identity, or who are we talking about?
Yeah, that's also a good question. In Hare Krishna mantra, for those who didn't hear, is Rama referring to Ram and Sita? So Srila Prabhupada said that Ram can refer to 3 people. One of them is Ram and Sita. You can think about Ram and Sita when you're chanting. If you want, you can think about Balram also. Balram is also Ram. And other one is Radha Raman also. Radha Raman. So that Ram can be Radha Raman also. So you can think about Krishna. You can think about Balram. You can think about Ram. Some people say there's a 4th one also. Prabhupada also said this many times. You can even think about Parshuram.
Parshuram is an incarnation of Shiva.
Parshuram is an incarnation of Vishnu. Yes. So you can think about any of these. According to your bhava, you can think about whoever you like.
He is still alive in this world, Parshuram.
Yeah, Parshuram is still here somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Very nice questions and very engaging. Thank you so much. So if you don't have Bhagavad Gita, please take Bhagavad Gita. We have Bhagavad Gita in all languages. You can leave some donation, whatever donation you would like to leave. If you want Hindi, there's Hindi. Nepali is there. English, if you want, there's English also. So please take one Bhagavad Gita and read it and make your life successful. So now we will stand up for Aarti. So Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.